in the heart of the Altai Mountains. To plunge into the atmosphere of mystical enigmas and mysteries, one should go to Russia, specifically to the Altai region. It has deservedly acquired the name Cradle of the World. The place from where humanity began its journey is there, in the heart of the Altai Mountains, where the borders of Russia, Kazakhstan, China, and Mongolia meet. Altai, to plunge into the atmosphere of mystical enigmas and mysteries, one should go to Russia, specifically to the Altai region. It has deservedly acquired the name Cradle of the World. The place from where humanity began its journey is there, in the heart of the Altai Mountains, where the borders of Russia, Kazakhstan, China, and Mongolia meet. Altai, a stunning land of snow-capped mountains, fascinating nomadic tribes, an incredible wilderness with offers of adventure. It is truly one of the most beautiful and pristine regions in all of Russia. The borders of this wild and untamed domain touch the semi-deserts of Mongolia and the vast Kazakh plains. For example, this is the place of the Yukok Plateau, mysterious and still largely unexplored. This is the most remote and isolated part of the Altai Mountains. The plateau lies at the heart of the Eurasian continent, almost equidistant to the four oceans of the world. Home to rare from where humanity began its journey is there, in the heart of the Altai Mountains, where the borders of Russia, Kazakhstan, China, and Mongolia meet. Altai, a stunning land of snow-capped mountains, fascinating nomadic tribes, an incredible wilderness with offers of adventure. It is truly one of the most beautiful and pristine regions in all of Russia. The borders of this wild
All right, shalom, shalom, family. I'm trying to get a conversation today in with an individual. I'm going to just pop something on here. Hopefully he comes today and we can have that conversation. If not, I'm going to reschedule it. See if we have that conversation today. I want to have a holy conversation. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. So I want to have a conversation with, I say, Geo Nomad. Hopefully he comes today. Otherwise, let me just show why I want to have this conversation. As I've been talking about this eugenic design for a long time, that the idea of people starting in the area of Africa is false. Modern people do not start in the area of Africa, and people need to just stop taking the ideas that are given by the world as facts without actual physical evidence. For example, here's an individual who is taking the classic worldview of everyone starting in Africa, which is false, as we can find haplogroups of modern people or lineages that make modern people outside of Africa. So every time they start this chart, they always start it off as an empty Y, and then all of a sudden you get your A00 in Cameroon, somehow, some way, in a time frame that's 100,000 years ago or earlier. You get your A0, which is actually A1B, and then you get your A1A. So, and they say these will be your African lineages. But what we're going to do today, I'm going to show you that there's a lot of A lineages outside of Africa, 30,000, 20,000, way earlier than that, and A00 outside of Africa. So the starting area is not here, but is actually over here. That's why I was showing this little video earlier, that the starting point is actually Russia.
Plunge into the atmosphere of mystical enigmas and mysteries. One should go to Russia, specifically to the Altai region. It has deservedly acquired the name Cradle of the World. The place from where humanity began its journey is there, in the heart of the Altai Mountains, where the borders of Russia, Kazakhstan, China and Mongolia meet.
So you heard what he just said. They said this is the area where a lot of the early humanity started. This is the area where it started at. So we're going to be looking at that. I was trying to have a conversation with this individual about this out of Africa concept. And can he actually prove that with actual fossils? I don't think so. I don't think you can actually prove this concept with fossils, as it's been highly debunked and it's not even provable. It's based upon the design of eugenics, which is a racist science, which declared people of darker skin descent must all have been closer related, lesser evolved, and everyone else later is more evolved. But that's not actually true. That's actually not true. So that's why I wanted to have that conversation on that, so that we can see where are they getting this idea? You know, what are they linking it to? As I did a lot of research, and I did not find a way you can link this like this, not even monophylactically. But let's talk about some things real fast. The oldest remains. This is from 2021. The oldest remains of mysterious extinct human ancestors unearthed in Siberian cave, right? Siberia, that's going to be in Russia, just to show it. So it's got the oldest remains of humans over here. Now, I believe when the people, either when they got off of the ark or earlier before the flood, the people had settled a lot over here in this area. Let me actually put that there so I can go right to it, to the cave over here. So it's going to be in Russia. So right there, it's called, a lot of people know it as caves that had Denisovans and stuff. You can see it as Denisova cave. You get a little understanding of it. It talks about some things that were found there. It's a little bit of what the cave looked like. It's really interesting outlook. I'm just going to close this just to look at that pinpoint there. So actually, we get a lot of people actually starting off here and spreading throughout the whole area. So what's interesting is a lot of people don't ever look at the actual ancient fossils. Now, you never want to date people or find the origin of people by modern people, because modern people don't tell you ancient locations. Modern people only tell you where they are currently. It doesn't tell you migrations or origins. If we look at A00 or even A000, A00, A with 4 zeros, A with 3 zeros, A with 2 zeros, those are highly related. I had talked about them before, that they are actually your genetic atom. For example, let me just show you. If we go to the family tree, DNA, you will see a tree there. And I just want to show you basically what they determined, that all humans are basically united by a single ancestor, right? Atom, right? We already know that. But there's a group called A00. So from a group that they declare as Atom, which is a root, there's another lineage that comes right after that, which is A00. And if you've seen on the tree, let me just show it real fast. Y chromosome tree here. Right here. And I'm just going to show an example of this, of what I mean. All right, just let that open up real fast. All right, so here it is. We can see right here, this would be the said root, where they say all people come from and everything. And if you close, everything underneath here is all modern people. But if we close that, we'll get a branch right here, your 1087, which 1087, you can see right here, 1087, it says ancient individual from an area of Cameroon. Now that's interesting because we can look at where that fossil is on Cameroon. You can see right here, 7,000 only. That's important. The individual that was found in Cameroon, the oldest A00, is only found about 7,000 years ago. That's about 5,000. That's like 5,000 BC. So when it says years before present, just take 2,000 from it, which all these will be years before present, YBP, years before present. And it would be about 7,900 years ago. So take 2,000 off of that. That's about 5,900 BC. That's not that long ago. It's not that long ago. When we're looking at fossils, that's not that long ago. Because if we look at the other A00s, because a lot of people, they just want to relate that they found one in Africa. They don't want to relate it to the oldest one that's found, which is not in Africa. So the oldest A00s that you can see here are actually not found in Africa. In fact, it starts in Russia, continues in Russia, switches over to Belgium, which is about Europe, and then from the area of Belgium, so from Russia, from this area of Russia, they end up going to Belgium over here. And then from Belgium, it's going to go over to Spain. And then it goes into Africa. That's important. Migrations are important to note. So back over here, you can see from Russia to Belgium, going into Spain, right? So it's in Russia for a long time because a lot of them that's found in Russia, and it goes into Spain, and then it goes into Cameroon. So that's something that's important to note, is that A00, the fossil that was found there was one that was found in the areas of Cameroon later, but it's earlier found in the areas of Russia. And that's when you're going to get your A00. See, you can see the rest of mankind will be under this branch, which will be 1090. So right here will be 1090. So you'll see underneath this branch. So that's important too. A00 right here doesn't actually make everything underneath here, which everything underneath here is actually connected by BT and CT. And that's what we talked about before, is that the way they actually connect is BT and CT. And we went over that when we went over the fact of how the split works. When we look at the whole tree, even at A0T, which is A1B is A0T, we can read, in other words, we see a departure of the first African branch, A0, from the main tree. None of the non-African groups, CT among them, descend from that departed haplogroup A0, which is actually A1B. That's very important. So we had talked about that A groups don't actually make CT or BT groups. And you can see here that technically what is called the root, or the next lineage of the root, A0 or A00, I'm going to close this right here, continuing on, all these don't descend into these. We'll just go into it, stops. So all these that you see here, which is one family tree, which you see right here, this A00, you'll see A00 making this one, making this one, making this one, and it's related to a person named Albert Perry, which they found him in North Carolina. So this A00 that has links to some early lineages in Africa, but even earlier lineages in Russia and in Belgium and Spain, earlier than the ones in Africa, actually go all the way back. And that's going to be the root of all mankind, that all mankind didn't actually start in Africa. The earliest humans weren't in Africa. That's very important, that the earliest humans were not in Africa. So, and that's also important to know that A00 doesn't make these. That's important too. A00 makes his own lineages. It'll make his own lineages, but it doesn't make all mankind. That's important because the outer Africa concept is actually false. It's not a real concept. We can also know a lot of different A groups outside of Africa for a long time. A's, CT outside of Africa for a long time. Different lineages that are going to be outside of Africa for a long time. For example, let's go to something over here and take a look at the A groups. Let's take a quick look at some of the roots of where the A groups are early on. Just going to go down here, and I'm going to open up this file here. This paper right here actually has the only recorded copy of a find of a combination of CF143, which is actually CF. Let me just show what I mean. Because if you go to CF, like for example, I'm going to show you, if you type down CF, and why is that important? Because I've been saying this, that the CF haplogroup is one family. The CF haplogroup is one family, just like BE is one family, but CF is also one family. But I talked about how they talked about right here, there are as yet, right, no confirmed cases of living individuals or remains belonging to the basal, pretty much CF. So it's saying basically they didn't find a CF group, but that's what we end up finding. We end up finding an actual fossil of a CF group, which was in Spain. We found a CF group that was located in ancient Spain, which is really interesting and very rare. I'm just gonna go to it real fast on here. Maybe I can find it real fast on this thing. Or I could search for it and grab it. Just gonna scroll here. Because sometimes you find C, sometimes you find CT, sometimes you find F, but CF is very rare to find. And that's what I was looking for that one for a long time, because C and F are highly related, but I couldn't 100% prove it until I found a fossil of a CF, which at first no one found one, but they knew they were related because of how the genetics are related. But there is a CF on here. Let me see if I can actually search it. Let me think how you searching this thing. Maybe we can insert, or rather, let's see, formulas, data. I'm not really sure how you search on this. To say view. Doesn't. I'm not gonna use that. I'm just gonna search for it. Shouldn't be too hard on here. But I'm gonna start at the bottom, in fact, because there's more at the bottom. Now, this is what I mean. I'm just gonna scroll up, and I'm just gonna point some things out. So, of course, the A group, some of them you're gonna find in Africa, but note the years is really close to our time. The ones we find in Africa, not late, not ancient times. The ones in ancient times we find in places like Belgium. Remember, I'll talk about that in Belgium and other places. Here's an A group. This one is in Belgium, 27,000 years ago. So 27,000 years ago. That's a long time ago. Here's another one, another A group in Germany. And this one is said 13,000 years ago. We can see the CT group in Romania said 30,000 years ago. So C group. We can see an A group in France. So you can see them in different areas. This one's fairly 9,000 years ago. It's going to go up more. There's some other ones. I'm going to keep going up. You can see some CT in the land of Israel, 10,000 years ago, 11,000 years ago. It's going to keep going up. That's another A group. That one's going to be in the area of Africa, but that one's only 5,000, 6,000 years ago. Go up a little more. As we want to find not just these A groups, which we find them in places like Spain, right here. That one's only 2,000-3,000 years ago. But also other lineages. This one is in Portugal. That's Spain, right here. About 4,000 years ago. Germany, 2,000 years ago. Right? Outside of Africa, A00, 2,000 years ago. 4,000 years ago. Greece. You can see one right here. Oh, this one's in Africa. About I'll say 6,000, max 8,000 years ago. But remember, the ones we just found, the A groups, were outside of Africa before they were in Africa. So that's very important to note. Because A groups are usually defined as being stationary in Africa. Here's another one, A, that's going to be up in the north, 4,000 years ago to 2,000. Keep going up. That one's just another CT, about 4,000. Just going to keep going upwards, point these things out. As I'm hoping the individual comes forth to have a conversation, because he just did a study on IJ. But this is what I often notice when they do this. I often notice that, for example, this group of IJ, where is IJ? Where's the actual fossil of IJ? Is that an actual fossil location where the IJ is found here? And then the IJK is actually not the only fossil of IJK. There is a fossil of IJK. So F makes GHIJK and then HIJK. And the only fossils for HIJK will tell you that they will be here, right? They will be in this area. And IJK is in this area, where if we look, we can just go to, let's go to the location. I'll just put it down right over here. You can see some places that will be in connection to Italy, the Balkans, Ukraine, and Russia, right? There's that Russia again, a connection to Russia, right? Because IJK and HIJK were one, but only one fossil was found of them in the Mesolithic European area and the Upper Paleolithic area. But for some reason, they like to put the thing on the chart wherever they want to put it. But it's actually over here. That IJK and HIJK was over here. It was over in these areas by Italy and Spain, going these ways from Russia, not from over here. Not actually coming out of this area, but from over here, coming from this area. Because we also can find an ancient lineage called Isham, which is a K haplogroup, Y chromosome, Y DNA of K, which makes your P, your MON, pretty much, a lot of the lineages, R, Q, they came from over here. That's why Q actually went to America, because Q came off from their father lineage and went that way. And R came over here as well. But IJK, the only fossil of IJK is over here. And then IJ isn't over here. Actually, the fossil to IJ is over here in Ukraine. So we can see that would be about 5,000 years ago, we find a fossil over there. And if we look at the other fossils, we find them about the same area. So that's going to be in Ukraine. So there's a lot of stuff going on in Ukraine right now. So we should know where Ukraine is. With Ukraine, right? Having conflicts with Russia and everything. So you see Belgium there. And then you see Ukraine right here. So they say that they found the IJ in Ukraine. So before you get I and J split, you got them in Ukraine. So that's very important. So you got them over here. But a lot of times when people do those charts, it doesn't actually reflect the fossils. You can see this one, here's another A, 4,000 years ago in Great Britain, right? Just going to keep going upwards. Because it's always interesting to note the actual movement of the fossils. And it's always interesting to see if, people are going to, when they touch on these things, are they going to just keep on playing copycat and copy everyone else who's, going about this? Or are they going to actually find real fossils? Here's an E group in Ukraine about 4,000 years ago. It's a long time ago. There's also an E group that's 17,000 years ago up in the north. There's another one that's an E1B1A in France about 5,000 years ago. You can see here some remember, this is the lineage that said to make other people, but we know it doesn't. Here's A1B. They'll say only 2,000 years ago in Africa. Right here, only 1,000 years ago in Africa. Right? There's no older A1Bs in Africa. It's not that old in Africa. A lot of lineages that you see here is not in Africa that old. Not that old in Africa. Here's another one. Look how old this A is in the Chad Republic. So Chad Republic, that's in the north, right? You can see right here, 30,000 years ago. So that's an A group with a U mtDNA. There's another one, another A group with a U mtDNA in the same area. You see right there, 30,000 years ago. So that's a long time. That's a long time that A was up here in this area. So I would like to see a fossil. I would like to see a fossil of A older than 30,000 years ago in Africa. And see this area, 30,000 years ago, A was over here. 30,000 years ago. 30,000 years ago. I want to see a fossil of A in Africa older than 30,000 years ago. Older than this one. This is the type of things I'm talking about. But A is actually really young. A group is actually really young. It doesn't stretch as old as you think it is. It's not as old as A00 other groups because A00 doesn't make all people. But A00 has links to Neanderthals and Denisovans, which are in the north, which, like I showed you, A00 came from Russia. So this one actually will be found in the north. That's 30,000 years ago. You can see right there, that's a long time ago. The ones that I showed you in Africa was way younger than that. That one's ancient in the north. Ancient times, 30,000 years ago in the north. Right? Go up a little bit. You know, and that's what makes it important when touching on the fossils that we touch on them very carefully and thoroughly. Otherwise, you know, we're painting a false narrative. And that's what the world's been doing for a long time. They've been painting a false narrative on where the people started and where these groups are actually found. You know, ancient genetics is actually fairly recent. It's not that old, finding these ancient fossils. So by recently examining genetics and finding ancient fossils, we have to conclude that we find them in certain areas that may not fit the other narrative. Remember, I was talking about that IJK found in Germany. You can see right there, said 5,000 years ago, IJK. So if someone claims that any lineage under IJK, even including LT was one in Germany, LT, which makes T and L, which comes from K, IJK. That's important to understand that the homeland, if when following the fossils, that the only fossils that's found have to actually be used correctly. Here's the only fossil of CF in Spain. So that's the only fossil of the actual CF find, which means every lineage under CF, the only fossil that we found was in Spain. So that's important, just to show that what I mean. So if we look at CF, I'm just gonna open this and go down to CF. And remember, like I said, it splits at BT and CT. So BT actually makes A and B groups. And we can show that on the reconstruction of Outer Africa not having enough proof. But if you look at CF and DE, these are brothers. CF and DE are brothers. I had talked about that before when we was talking about the F group, that these are actually brothers. These are actually brother lineages. For example, let me just go to one here. We had talked about that, the bottom here, where they found E-M96 in solute lineages. And then they talk about basically the CDEF, or basically CT, M168, was basically found in areas outside of Africa. And they concluded this: these would have spread globally and diversified over time and space. This model would imply that both CFP143, which is the one that I was just showing you with the fossil in Spain, and DE-YAP, which I can show you a fossil of DE-YAP outside of Africa before it's in Africa, as they split in the Middle East, evolved nearby, but outside Africa. So these lineages actually evolved nearby based on actual genetic information of actual finds of these things. They're telling us that the Saudi Arabian lineages, or the lineages that basically make your J's and your I's and your E's and all those things in between, they're highly related, but outside of Africa. But outside of Africa. That's very important, because we know that the lineages of D and E have connections with Asia and other lineages. That's very important. Very, very important. And that's why we're going over the root of these things, the root foundation of these things. As I called this individual to come and have a conversation, but just be aware, when you see things like this, they're painting their own narrative. They're painting things without actual fossils and based upon he say, she say type things. They'll say this person said this thing and that person said that thing, so it must be this thing and it must be that thing. But it's not. That's not actually true. So that's something to understand, that even though the date, the years of a lot of these things, there's not a lot of fossils even found up to these year points, to these years that a lot of times they express it as. It's not actually correct. But we did find a fossil of that CF P143. We know that that fossil actually shows us that it was in the north for a long time. And remember, I talked about that, how the carbon dating, it can be sometimes off with the carbon dating. So that one can actually be older or younger than that point. Most likely older than that, because that CF makes all groups underneath it, like I, J, K, R, N, everything. Here's another one, A0 in France. You can see that A0 in France about 10,000 years ago. So 10,000 years ago, we can see A lineage in France. A0, but A lineage in France. So you can see, here's some more A's. We can see these A's, but these, look how younger they are in Africa. So these ones will be in Africa, but look how much younger they are. This one's only 8,000 years ago. But remember, we found one said 30,000 years ago in Germany. This one's only 5,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. A0. Those are A0, A lineages. A lineages. So you can see a little bit what's going on. This one's in Canada. So A0 or A lineage in Canada says 6,000 years ago. So 6,000 years ago, remember, take 1,000 off, that's 4,000 BC. You can see here. So I just wanted to make that a quick understanding, that you gotta be careful when going over these things, because a lot of people, they think they understand it, but they actually don't. They got to actually look at the fossils to get a full confirmation on where they are, and they got to understand that a lot of the out of Africa concepts are not based on fossils. They're not actually based on fossils, but they're based on an assumption based upon pigmentation. The assumption was based upon pigmentation at the time, that those with usually a darker skin seem like they started in Africa and they must be less evolved. But that's not even how people are connected, right? A doesn't actually make BT or CT. And the A groups, the oldest ones, are actually not in Africa. We can even note with the BT group. So right here, we got A groups, but we also got a BT group right here, said 30,000 years ago in the same areas that we seen the other A's in Czech Republic, right? You can take a look at it. That's BT found here. So you can see BT which makes some A and B groups, and you're going to have a connection with CT groups. But that's found outside of Africa, long time ago. I want to see any fossils that would predate these, because these are some of the oldest ones that are found. And in Africa, they're younger. The ones in Africa are much younger than the ones outside of Africa. The fossils, you can look at almost every fossil in Africa, and you'll get nothing but young dates under 30,000 years ago. Dates under 30,000 years ago, because they're not that old. And DE is one of those groups that I wouldn't want anyone who takes the world's narrative to work on DE, because like I said before, if you look carefully at DE, the whole picture, right? DE main areas are outside of Africa. And you got to also see like some of the papers that came out 2021, 2022, that talks about they found a 39,000-year-old DE over here in Syria. So that's also very important to note. But D, as you can see, the D here, basically in this little area over here, right there, which this D group, they would have split. D and E would have split in this area, and D would have been more dominant in these areas. As you can see, that these ones are more older, 7,000 years ago and whatnot. So the D group was over here a long time ago. That's very important. They was in these areas a long, long time ago. But they would have split from the DE group. They would have split from basically the combination of DE, which, if I remember, there's a DE like 7,000 years ago over here, which is right here, I'm thinking. Or let's see. Just gonna click through, see where is that. Right there. 7,000 years ago. That's a DE. That's gonna be one of the oldest DEs before it goes into Africa. That's just some more E's and everything. So you get a lot of different lineages that will be E groups that will be outside of Africa a long time ago, before they're in Africa. So that's just important to note, that that's where you get a lot of these lineages outside of Africa. It's something you gotta be careful on when looking at. But I wanted to have a conversation with this individual about the roots of people, because he seems like he's doing a lot of studying on the roots of people. He's informing people on where people are from. I think this is the generation of truth. We need to be about truth. So I guess I'll try to reach him again and try to have a conversation on these things. So again, A00 makes his own. A00 comes from A00 comes from A000, comes from 000, pretty much. Well, that sounds weird, but that's something I was talking about before also, is that the way A00 works, I'll just show it real fast. Let me just go to a little tree design with the other A's. Here it is. You can see right here, remember I was talking about A0000 is Denisovan, has connections to A000, which is actually, you can see right here in El Chiron, that's the Neanderthals. And then you have your A00, which is its own branch. It doesn't make all modern people today. Doesn't make all people today. But your A00 makes its own, and A0 doesn't make BT. So that's why you got to note the split. You got to note, where does it actually split? BT and CT makes all people. A0, A1 doesn't make BT nor CT. That's 100%. We can see it stated on the paper called Reconstruction of Outer Africa Not Having Enough Proof, because that's how they tried to make people connected with A0, claiming that A groups are only in Africa, which is not true, which is actually not true. So that's why you got to look at these things carefully. So this is just something I just want to talk about I don't know if the individual going to come, because a lot of times people, they like to throw out information, don't like to have a conversation. They just like to tell people that they know stuff, following after the world. But at the end of the day, when judgment comes, it's going to be known that they didn't move with truth. They didn't walk in the fire of it all. They didn't come after a conversation. They just wanted to throw some things out and enforce the world's opinion, which is not true. So that's why I think these things are worth talking about. If someone wants to have a conversation on these things, and knows a little bit about it, I'm willing to have a conversation on it. But don't, please, people that's doing this design, this out of Africa design that's putting people in Africa with no fossils and no conclusion or nothing like that, gotta stop. They gotta stop doing that, especially when they're doing these things and they're talking about the root of people. Like, for example, let's see, where is it? The one where he talks about Adam. I think it's down here. It talks about Y chromosome Adam and everything. But we know that this lineage is not in Africa. See, that's the problem. They say that people started Africa at this time. And that's what we was showing when we was doing that reconstruction out of Africa, not have enough proof. Also, remember, we also had talked about, you know, the actual out of Africa concept not having proof at all, right? When we talk about, they said the analysis identified a Eurasian Y DNA, right? A00 that was followed by 3 separate Homo sapiens, right? Exoduses, A0, A, and A, right? So it's basically be like A0 or A1 and A1A, A1B and A1A. From Eurasia, we know that these lineages came from Eurasia into Africa with A0, right? Signifying the earliest and the most recent of these early exoduses. And that's what we was talking about, that the groups, the A groups, actually show themselves to be outside of Africa. And even their mixtures show that they was mixing with individuals outside of Africa. And that's why we was talking about that, the instead of the OOAH, the out of Africa hypothesis, there's no support for it. As it says, it lent no support to the out of Africa hypothesis. But what did it support? Out of Eurasia into Africa. Out of Eurasia. OOEH. So it actually represents the OOEH design, the out of Eurasia, Europe and Asia hypothesis. So that's why I wanted to have that conversation. I was hoping to have that conversation today. Y'all willing, we get a conversation like that. But shalom, family. It's good to see you guys. Y'all willing, I'm going to try to, get these conversations in, but I'm trying to get all this stuff done before, the next year comes, as, I feel we got enough understanding of who is who in genetics, but we're going to do a little update video on L3 and talk about L3's locations. Cause I found some, before L3 goes into Africa, I'm going to show you that L3 is going to have locations over here. They're going to have locations going all the way over here, all the way to China over here. We're going to have locations of L3 going over here and L3 going throughout here, going through Yemen, through this area over here before it even goes in Africa. L3. So we'll talk about that later on. That L3 doesn't start in Africa, but you'll see a lot of times on even charts like this. This is why I don't like this stuff, because it's racist. People don't even know it's racist. They have no clue. And some people don't care that it is. But one day it will be established that it was indeed a racist design, because one, it's not looking at the actual evidence, and two, it has no proof. It has absolutely no proof when it comes to ancient genetics. You see how it puts L3? It put all the L's in Africa. That's not true. We got fossils of L3 before they're in Africa, outside of Africa, way earlier than this. So that's something that's very important, that L3 is outside of this area. It starts here, it goes here, it goes all the way to China, to Finland, mixing with Y chromosome men with N. I'm going to show that when we go over it. They go down into Yemen, they settle in these areas, and then they go down into here. Start over here, they go down in this area first. That's where L3 is. L3 doesn't even, I don't know why they put an L3 over here. Elder doesn't even appear over here to way later on, But Elder is going to be here in Israel, in Yemen, over here where you see Greece, over here in Mongolia, before it even goes in Africa. I'll talk about that when we go over it. We'll get a chance to go over it. So I guess, I want to have a conversation with that individual, but sometimes we got people who, they say they want to have a conversation, but sometimes they don't want to have it. They don't want to have a conversation because then they might make themselves look silly with their statements. So I did contact him. He said he's gonna come have a conversation and everything, but we'll see, because he likes to have his little conversation. As you see, I wanted to go live with him. Let's go live about modern human fossil origins. He says, I'm preparing now. That was 2 hours ago. All right. So thought he was gonna come and have a conversation, but I do provide some information. He might end up blocking it, I don't know. But I did provide some information, as I think the false out of Africa concept is bogus. And I think people need to stop copying after that design. It's kind of like people copying the racist design of eugenics. Imagine people practicing eugenics today, right? Would you let that happen because it's popular, right? Like, for example, eugenics, if you know about eugenics, I'm talking about just claiming the idea that one person is less, right? Would you claim that one person who's blind is less valuable than someone who can see? Another person who's disabled, maybe he can't walk as good as someone else, he's less of a human than another person. Could you imagine if that science was still continuing today, right? I work in the medical field. I work with disabled people, so I find also that offensive. I find eugenics offensive. I think false science and false theories is one, offensive, and it should stop at some point, and it requires people to work together to stop it. That's what it requires. So I just wanted to talk about some of these things and have some information on some of these things, because I was talking about, like I was saying, the Denisovan caves that are this age, right? 100,000 said 100,000, 122,000 years old, and we did find A's over there in that area. We can find A000, A0000, and we can find A00, and we can find other A's in that area. And that's what I'm concluding, is that actual human fossils are outside of Africa before they're in Africa, and the out of Africa concept is false. So I guess I'm gonna leave it like that, because there's nothing much to talk about until I get that conversation with him. Y'all willing, if I can get a conversation with him, I'm gonna still be trying to reach him and have a conversation with him about these things, as I think is important to try to get a conversation at least. So with that, I completely think that this design is one, low education. It shows the low amount of information known about these things. I don't think the person is a bad person. I think that he just is focusing on the lie. I think that he's just convinced by the lie, doesn't really know the actual fossils behind the whole thing. And it's just weird to see someone that has a commitment to know about the truth, or at least it looks like the truth, at least in a way, but still come to such a false premise. So this concept is not true. People aren't even connected like that. A00 doesn't make these, and A00 doesn't even, or A0 and A1 doesn't make CT. So this, even the way this branches is false. Even the way this is monophylactic, even the way this branches, it's false. It's a false way of branching. So that's what I'm concluding, is that the way that it branches is not actually the way that they're connected. And not just that, but the place where they start off at in Africa is not true. They want to keep the people as far from this area as they could, because how the biblical narrative says they started over here. They started in this area. So that's something that's also important to know. After having a conversation, I believe that they may have started right here, I'm going to show it real fast at Mount Judy. So right about here, in this little area here, this is where I believe that they got off at the ark. In fact, it looks like even there's an ark there. If you've seen the landmass, you can see it looks like the ark, almost the exact dimensions as Noah's ark. So Judy, mountain of Noah's descent, right up there. So it's very interesting. Look at how that looks. You know, it's almost, you know, the more if you look into it, it's almost undeniable, right? This little thing looks like that ark. So that's why I believe where the people got off at, that the ark had settled on that mountain, and the ground, obviously, as the wood went away, right, rotted and everything, you will have this design left there that shows evidence of the ark and the flood and everything, showing evidence that that's where they were. So I believe they were around this area, no doubt. I believe they were around this area, right next to Mount Ararat, really close to it. So very, very, very important to know. Not in Africa, not actually in Africa, but I believe they started over in these areas. So you can see Mount Ararat, Mount Judy. I believe that this is where humans started and then spread out different ways, which is contested with fossils. Actual fossils show it. But with that, family, I couldn't get the guy to join today. If he's here, I don't know if he's here watching or anything like that, but I'll let him know. I tried to contact him as he said he was going to come, but I put a link in the description. And the next, I say at 5 is right now it's 51 minutes. At 55 minutes, we'll end it. But that's why I had a plan, you know, to go over some things, teach about the roots, because the roots are important and everything. But I'm gonna go about that another time. As you know, I have a video planned to go over the actual origins, the biblical origins of the flood, based on the biblical narrative and historical documents, things like Flavia Josephus says and other writings that talk about where did they go, right? The biblical narrative is truth, right? There's a lot of evidence when it comes to the biblical narrative, as you can see with Mount Judy and that ark that's set there and everything. A really interesting design. You can see other people have measured it and everything is basically exactly just like what it says. Even it got anchors. You've probably seen it already, that this place has basically those anchors that's needed to station the ark. Let me see if I can view image right here. You can kind of see, but there it is. This is supposed to be a anchor that was used with the ship. So it's a lot of pieces of evidence there. A lot of pieces of evidence in this area. I want to kind of just type it down. There it is. You can see the anchors to the ships. So very, very interesting stuff, right? That can easily be the ark, no doubt. And this could be an anchor to the ship to set the ship still, right? So very, very, very interesting stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. I believe there's enough evidence in genetics, in the geography, in multiple pieces of history that talks about basically this piece of evidence of the flood. There's multiple pieces of evidence that can contest for the flood and its existence and the knowledge of basically Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff, I think. Very, very interesting stuff. So hopefully we can have that conversation. I don't believe the Out of Africa concept because it has no evidence. And I definitely don't believe the world's concept of millions and billions of years. I believe all those things can be understood with a simple understanding of the effects of the flood. So I had a lot of things planned, but I couldn't get the guy today to have a conversation on that. But one day we'll have a conversation on these things and talk about where humans are found and whatnot. Hopefully we can have a conversation with someone and if someone believes the Out of Africa concept, and if someone believes the evolutionary concept, I'm always willing and ready to have that conversation so that others can have that benefit of the truth. As there's more information that I don't go over unless certain questions. But here's something interesting. D&E, if you find out that its root, they'll talk about it actually split in the Middle East. Even right here, you can see the Japanese haplogroup DY chromosomes. It says 53,000 years ago, most likely by a split from a shared ancestral population. So it talks about that it was in the Middle East, or in a sense in Asia. But that's just one thing out of many things. So with that, family, that's all I got for you for today. Y'all willing, I'm gonna try to reach him and try to have a conversation on those things so that we can have someone who has their own point of view versus the biblical point of view, so you can compare it and get an idea of what it looks like when the world comes against actual observable information. So I guess with that, be blessed, be beloved, and amen.